doctors discover something hidden in a woman who had been in coma for 15 years. A nurse went to the room of a patient who had been in a coma for more than 10 years during her routine morning checkup. Despite being abruptly still, the woman started to make unsettling noises that alarmed the nurse. When the nurse took off the sheet covering her, she screamed in utter fear, unable to believe what she was seeing. The nurse started to check her right away, and that's when she saw something was off about her body. Maria was a stunning young lady who, 15 years ago, when she was only 6 years old, was admitted to the hospital after being discovered unconscious on a city sidewalk. She was fondly referred to as Maria by all the staff of the renowned hospital of the capital region. A humble family from a far-off village finally came to look for the girl after nearly a month had passed without anybody being able to explain the girl's origin. The two elderly were horrified to discover the condition of their young daughter and were advised that they would have to pay a significant quantity of money if they wanted to keep her alive. The elderly were forced to give the order to disconnect the child, who was their only child, because there was no way they could obtain even a small portion of the substantial sum they were seeking. Doctors and nurses, upon learning of this, were so dismayed, as many had become attached to the sweet little girl, and decided to contribute money to cover Maria's expenses until she finally woke up. The nurse who had grown closest to her was Andrea, one of the more experienced staff members at the hospital. She claimed to feel like her second mother and to spend hours each day entertaining and counseling her in the passionate belief that one day she would be awake. Andrea was struck by a car one day as she crossed the street to go to the hospital. As a result, she spent 3 hard months in bed. When she was released from the hospital, her children took care of her and transported her to a different city. She made a full recovery, but she worried that her companions wouldn't take as much care of Maria as she did. Andrea was finally allowed to go back to work a year later. She went to see her beloved Maria on her first day, full of joy. She appeared the same as always when I entered her room, but her face was sporting a really peculiar expression. She then started to make some odd groans, which greatly startled the nurse and caused her to see an odd bulge in the middle of her body. Andrea raced to get the physicians after screaming violently when the sheet fell to the ground. The unusual mass was Maria's large, growing tummy, which she was soon to give birth to. Everybody was baffled. After a difficult procedure, the small infant was born in an almost miraculous act. The medical report indicated that the infant had a good chance of surviving despite her low weight and precarious health. Later, Andrea did not think twice to inform the police because it was clear that someone had physically violated Maria by taking advantage of her vulnerable state. The directors gave the order to disconnect her because they were terrified of the conflict that was about to occur. When the nurse learned of this, she strongly disapproved and hurried to the poor girl's room holding the child in her arms to implore her to wake up. Andrea placed the infant on Maria's stiff body as the medical staff entered to disconnect her in the final effort to encourage her to wake up. To everyone's surprise, she opened her eyes as soon as she felt the infant's warmth and heard her cry. After being shut off from the outside world for 15 years, Maria awoke to discover that she was now a mother to a young girl in addition to being a lady. That was difficult to process. Maria was very perplexed. Andrea informed her that she would look after her and her daughter, whom they named Esperanza. Esperanza's father was identified after extensive DNA testing as none other than an esteemed doctor who gave the largest donation to keep her alive in the hospital. With the use of his influence, he attempted to abolish the laws, but thanks to the nurse's persistent pursuit of justice and the solidarity of hundreds of others who were outraged by such brutality, the cruel man was found guilty and condemned to prison. Now, Maria and Esperanza, who share her sweetness and beauty, joyfully reside with Andrea and her kids, who have served as her greatest sources of inspiration and have adopted Maria and Esperanza as members of their